Hey everybody, it's John from Humor and History, and I am back with, this is a Mojo deal, Watch Mojo. It's top 10 historical inaccuracies people think are true. So without wasting any time, let's get into it.
Number 10.
See how many you get right.
George Washington's teeth.
George Washington suffered from horrible dental disease for many, many years.
He
It
did.
plagued him his entire life.
Don't believe the myth that George Washington didn't do all he could to prevent the loss of all his teeth.
He's pouring money into dentistry. He's getting teeth pulled.
At least
I hope this is not all Americanisms. I will be taking it down if it's all American. So if you are watching this, it's not all about the U.S.
Washington could afford better than the wooden false teeth that most people believe to be his signature. He had 4 dentures made from premium material
Yeah.
for the time, certainly not including wood.
Animals, cows were used.
Human
Their
teeth.
teeth were filed down.
It is generally assumed that Washington had stained his preferred ivory sets, giving them a wooden appearance. You'd think he would have kept these costly chompers in better condition. Perhaps the first president of the United States had other priorities. Number 9. Let them eat cake.
The royal
Okay.
family was held very much to blame for the famine that was afflicting the country.
Marie Antoinette
Yes.
supposedly sealed her fate during the French Revolution when she suggested that peasants end their famine with cake or brioche.
Such nonsense. I would never say that.
Of course, those who think this reflected how out of touch she was with her subjects are out of touch with history. The phrase qu'il mangeait de la brioche was coined in Jean-Jacques Rousseau's autobiography, attributed to an unidentified great princess. The book was released when Antoinette was only 9 years old and still living in Austria. Nonetheless, revolutionaries inspired by Rousseau's philosophies misappropriated the quote in campaigns to defame the queen. Still,
Interesting.
to this day, many believe "let them eat cake" says everything about the elitism that led to Antoinette's execution.
She said,
You know what? That kind of does make sense. I mean, I could see how people would just keep it going because it seems like appropriate. It seems like, it was all about taking down the bourgeois, taking down the upper class, the ruling elite. And it seems so indicative, or what one would assume they could say, just to make it that much more believable. And so I could see why it could stick around, but I didn't know that it came from, I think, Rousseau. But I know she didn't say that. But definitely heard the myth. Have you?
Disney spent a great deal too much money on dresses and jewels, but she really didn't say anything quite so callous.
Number 8. Viking helmets. Medieval Norse raiders were known to be devils on the battlefield. But of all the fearsome helmets that these Vikings wore in combat, there's no evidence that any of them had horns. This belief goes back to artistic liberties among 19th century romanticists in Scandinavia and Germany. It's believed that the visual was widely popularized by Richard Wagner's Ring of the Nibelung cycle.
Really?
The horned helmet myth stuck in pop culture that quickly. Now,
Wow.
21st century artistic depictions of Vikings are starting to undo it. Research does suggest that Scandinavians wore horned helmets for ceremonies during the Nordic Bronze Age. Of course, as skilled as Vikings were in battle, such headgear would be too impractical there. Number 7.
I can't help but look at that and think, when they're dancing around the fire, that it's very much like indigenous people of America, the way they did that. Must be a very human trait, if that is the case. Yes, but there are many. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but there are many examples of people who wore, horns, on their helmets. So I mean, there could have been one or two maybe that just thought it was pretty cool, but I don't know, not a thing.
Napoleon complex.
Oh, yeah.
Napoleon Bonaparte led France out of a revolution into one of the most powerful empires in the world.
The English forget that my strength is speed. In 20 days, I will be in the heart of Germany.
It sounds like he was compensating for something. This is the idea behind the Napoleon complex, which attributes a man's ego trips to insecurity about his short stature. The thing is that Napoleon stood somewhere between 5'6" and 5'10". That was actually above average height for a man of his era. Belief to the contrary originated from British propaganda, which belittled the empire's nemesis by literally belittling him. The campaign may have had no real impact on Napoleon's conquest, but it seriously distorted his legacy. With greater sensitivity to history and height, the public is finally starting to reject this tall tale.
And though he never achieved his dream of conquering Europe, he undoubtedly left his mark on it.
That's interesting. I want to see the new Napoleon movie. I have not seen it, and I'd like to. I don't know, the guy who plays him. What's it? Not River Phoenix. Joaquin Phoenix. He's tall. He's a tall guy. So I want to see if they dispel that rumor. But I can see how very easily, again, it could be said that he's very short. And then calling it a Napoleon complex comes from that. A lot of things come from things that aren't true, but are widely believed. So, okay.
Number 6. The British are coming.
Let's admit it.
Yeah.
We love Paul Revere because he's America's first action hero.
The American Revolution might never have been had the Massachusetts Provincial Congress not been warned of a British attack.
Just a quick heads up for my British friends that watch this. Paul Revere did a famous ride. It basically started the Revolutionary War for us. I know you guys don't learn too much about it, but some of you might know about it. And he was a famous person. I mean, I think it was his grandson was fought and was killed in the American Civil War. There are some notable families that have done a lot, and Paul Revere warned people that the British troops were coming to take stores of gunpowder. So their famous poems, Paul Revere's Midnight Ride, even the Pennsylvania Dutch or the Pennsylvania Germans, who I am part of, we have a little joke humor that we say, but he's a historical figure.
This
he made it happen.
Heroic image is enhanced by Paul,
and it was with 2 other people, by the way, but Paul Revere is the one who gets all the credit.
Paul Revere shouting, "The British are coming," throughout his ride from Boston to Concord.
Thanks to Revere, America isn't caught napping at the outset of the war that will win our independence.
Well, that wouldn't be particularly smart espionage. Revere and William Dawes, in fact, covertly passed the intelligence to other writers before Revere was apprehended in Lincoln. There were as many as 40 messengers by the time word reached Concord. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow just found it more romantic to credit the original writers in his 1860 poem, Paul Revere's Ride. The idea that Revere galvanized a Massachusetts devoid of crown loyalists is pretty absurd. In playing to patriotic ego, however, Longfellow's poem is popularly taken as fact.
This idea of him riding alone, the dead of night, sounding the alarm, raising the troops, is the most enduring feature of this myth that we've really bought into as Americans.
So yeah, it's important to note he was not alone. There were at least 3 other that started with the message, and then of course once it gets out, you know how things go, it fans out. So why do we even care about this, and why is it important? Well, because everybody needs somebody. If depending on which side you're on, okay. You need someone to sort of rally around. You need an action hero, like it was said, but you also need someone who made the first step happen and that you look to. George Washington wasn't a person for us at the moment. He was not leading the Continental Army or anything like that. We didn't even have a Continental Army at the time. It was all a bunch of militia. So people rallied around, him. And that's where we get all these weird people of the revolution. Not weird people, but different people of the revolution. Because newspapers were a thing, and that's how information traveled. And they would, history would glorify them to unify people.
5. Rosa Parks' seat.
Rosa Parks sat down on the bus and began what we know today as American Civil Rights Movement.
The Civil Rights Movement flourished with Rosa Parks' arrest on a segregated bus in Montgomery, Alabama. Many believe that her act of defiance was the first of its kind. More naively, some think Parks took a white person's seat first. She actually was seated in the black section of the bus, but broke Jim Crow laws by refusing to defer her seat after a white passenger's section reached capacity.
So in the South, during the segregation, and I'm not speaking on the morality of the thing because it's something different, but just as the way it was in terms of laws and I guess ordinances, if you were black, you sat towards the back of the bus. If you were white, you sat at the front of the bus. And this is when public transportation was more, prevalent. And then when more white people got on the bus, the black people had to give up their seats to the white people. And this is American South. This isn't all over the United States. This is just the American South. And I mean the deep South for that matter. And so she refused to give up her seat. She had been working so many hours, and she just, her feet were swollen, blistered, and she refused to get up and give her seat to a white person. I mean, this is peaceful defiance, if you will, and it comes from, a lot of other places. Gandhi, passive way to make change.
When Rosa Parks decided to stay seated in December of 1955, I was 2.5 years old. I know that what Rosa Parks did made a huge difference in my life.
Yeah. Black people were entirely barred from white-only spaces. Yep. Though this particular incident sparks the Montgomery bus boycott, Irene Morgan, Claudette Colvin, and others did the same thing earlier.
Lasting over a year, the Montgomery bus boycott was an overwhelming success and inflicted substantial revenue losses.
Parks nonetheless deserves praise for showing how many people were willing to take a stand against the lie of separate but equal by staying seated. Number 4, Thomas.
By the way, it's very interesting if you get a chance to look at the history of the South and all the different things, different fountains to drink from. It was very different. It wasn't really until people actually started seeing some of this stuff on TV that it began to mark change. I mean, you could read about it in the papers, but it didn't necessarily do it justice. It's sort of one of those things that you have to see on TV. And when you start seeing it, a lot more people really realized how rough things were. I don't think people in the North or out West, some people out West, but yeah, it was. Yeah. Thomas Edison invented the light bulb. Okay, Brits, here you go.
Edison invented the light bulb.
It's not hard to invent a light bulb that lasts for just 15 seconds. The problem is to get it to last for many, many hours.
American inventor Thomas Edison accrued more than 1,000 U.S. patents, with the incandescent light bulb being considered his masterpiece. While one can reasonably assume he didn't come up with the idea entirely, the invention of the light bulb is complicated.
People around the world were working on electric light. People announcing to the press, Eureka, I have it. But, the press was kind of focused on Edison.
The concept of producing light with an electric arc was first realized by Humphrey Davy in the early 1800s. Edison's carbonized filament design may be considered groundbreaking, but English inventor Joseph Swan coincidentally patented a near identical model at the same time. Inquiries found no evidence of intellectual infringement. Edison and Swan ultimately merged their companies to help spread light bulbs throughout the world. Though American mythos gives Edison all the credit, all visionaries need some guiding light.
There was a sense in which we were entering a brave new world.
Number 3.
So that's a very interesting thing. It happened quite a bit. Americans tended to take more credit for a lot of British inventions, but context is something that right now is killing people in the modern world. They're just saying, oh, this was horrible what we did in the past. This was bad. Well, you've got to look at it in context. This is after the Industrial Revolution, there are many inventions all over the world. People are trying to create some sort of a telephone, their music recording on phonographs. There's radio that's going to come out. Things that electricity can do. I mean, they're being made all over the world. One of the big things, though, is that the United States had a way of marketing things. And, of course, pointing to an American as the creator and then marketing it as such was very popular to people who lived in America, who were going to be the consumers and who began to have more and more money to spend. And it's just the way things turned out. And but yes, there were many different kinds of bulbs, and there you go.
Einstein's grades.
Like many great innovators, Einstein was a rebel, a loner, but deeply curious.
It's hard to overstate Albert Einstein's brilliance. His academic underdog story, on the other hand, has been inflated by the notion that one of the greatest scientists of the modern age flunked math and science in secondary school. His published final report card shows a 6 in algebra, geometry, and physics. That was the lowest grade possible at the Cantonal School in Aarau before Einstein's day. During his last year, the school inverted its grading system, meaning that Einstein got the highest marks in the field he went on to reinvent. Granted, he did have trouble with organic sciences. Still, with a history score to match math and physics, Einstein's grades alone are a lesson in the importance of proper research.
So it was also thought that it was also a popular belief that he yes, not only did he flunk, but I guess he flunked out. Maybe they just said that, but that he just didn't even finish school. Anyway, sorry.
2. Salem witch burning. America's puritanical foundation was first shaken in 1692. Colonial Massachusetts had to reassess its values after the mass conviction and execution of people, mostly in Salem, for supposedly practicing witchcraft.
Anyone and everyone among them might be a witch and Satan's willing helper.
At least they didn't import Europe's common practice of burning convicted witches at the stake.
Yeah, that's one thing I believe we did not do.
19 of the 30 people found guilty were hanged. Giles Corey was crushed with stones for refusing to enter a plea to his charge. American folklore has since conflated these trials with European ones, which regularly featured fatal witch tests and executions by immolation. The Salem witch trials were more solemn than the sensational fables. Whatever people have come to envision with this infamous episode, it's more important to remember the tragedy of superstition and neighbors' betrayal.
We've come a long way from here. Due process, presumption of innocence, burden of proof. Criminal law became more civilized in the time following the Salem witch trials.
So yeah, one of the things just to mention, there were some, and this was a big thing. When I was in college, we talked about the Puritans. We talked about a lot of different things. Puritans were very interesting, very religious, and they had to deal with Native Americans who were very logical. As a matter of fact, between them, there were a lot of different fights, and mostly because the Indians wanted to take their kids to increase their numbers because they were having disease and dying off. But in this particular case, in the Salem witch trials, there were 2 young girls who were acting kind of weird. And one of the theories was that they were taking magic mushrooms, I'm not sure what they're exactly called, but, they ate the wrong kind of mushrooms. And that was one of the theories that has gone on, which is very interesting. But yes, we did not burn anybody, but we did change our laws after that.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe.
In that particular area, I if I'm not mistaken.
Subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications.
Feel free to do that too for mine.
1. Pyramids built on slave labor.
Though ancient Egyptian civilization lasted for nearly 3,000 years, its kings only built huge tombs like these for a few centuries.
Ancient Egypt built so much of modern civilization. Many systems have also been inspired by the premise that this world was partly built on slave labor. The mighty pyramids of Giza are particularly associated with such atrocities, but overwhelming archaeological evidence suggests that slavery was not involved in their construction. It sure wasn't aliens either. The builders were skilled Egyptian laborers who were paid fairly. Ancient Greek historian Herodotus spread the theory that these laborers were enslaved. This myth was finally cemented by misinterpretations of the Book of Exodus, which never explicitly claims that the Israelites built the pyramids that predate their culture, with modern historians enabling us to admire the Giza pyramids guilt-free. They're also a monument to the power of historical inaccuracy. Did you enjoy?
All right. Were any of those news to you? Some of them were to me, and I realized I think I misspoke on one or two topics as I was going through there, but I didn't know so much about the pyramids of Giza. I'd like to learn more about them. All right, guys, let me know in the comments what you think. Take care. Talk to y'all soon.